What's up, everybody? Welcome into a new TBN radio here at the Blitz Network. With you here, as always, your host, not co-host, and editor-in-chief of the Blitz Network, Robert Zaglinski. The Bears season has unfortunately come to an end, my friends. A 16-15 loss to the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles at home on Sunday night in the wild card game. A poetic, I guess, defeat, almost too poetic that it came on Cody Parkey's leg on a doink on the left upright. A game where the Bears had their fair share of opportunities and just couldn't capitalize, and their season is over, and they will have to look ahead and use this game as a learning experience and try to pick themselves up and contend again in 2019. But that is a long ways away. We have a lot to discuss. We have a lot to break down about this game and about the short-term future in the next coming months and weeks. And for this special playoff, I guess, season-ending podcast, that's what this is. This is a State of the Bears type thing. I have instituted a three-headed monster. You guys all know Adam Hess, who is our lead multimedia producer. You can follow him on Twitter at _Adam Hess. Adam, how are you, buddy?
I'm as good as I can be.
Yeah, that just about sums it up. And for our other host, our other piece of our puzzle here, Brad Spielberger. I hope I pronounced that right. He's our lead cap analyst. He's joining us for the first time on the pod. You can follow him on Twitter at BradOTC. He also does work for Over the Cap. Brad, did I pronounce that right?
I love that pronunciation. That was so right that it's like historically right, not even currently right. So Spielberger, yeah, beautiful.
It makes up for the time where I completely misspelled your name when I wrote. I think when I edited your first article. So I'll take that win. All right, boys. We can just kind of hand this off. Your first thoughts. I know it's still very fresh. I know the wound is still it's still gaping. But your first impressions from that loss. A lot of people expected a deep run for the Bears in January, and that's not going to happen.
I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I think to me, at the end of the day, there's a lot to be said about the way they lost this game. Obviously, Cody Parkey has kind of been an ongoing narrative for this team for the whole season regarding, his missed kicks and whatnot. But I think this loss really comes down to coaching. I don't think Matt Nagy put his team in the best position to win this game. Throughout the entire game, I think as the game went on, he got better with his play calling. But then I think that the second to last drive the Bears had, which was right before the Eagles took the lead, he got way too conservative after the Bears had just scored a touchdown the drive before, and Mitch Trubisky was hot, and they just ran a very strange play set. And then after that, or I shouldn't say after that, because I don't think he really did anything. He only had one other drive after that. But in the first half, just the play calling was weird. The game plan wasn't working, and they didn't make the necessary adjustments. And he wasn't really letting Mitch Trubisky loose. It was kind of a conservative approach, and so I didn't like it. So for me, I think this loss comes down to coaching, because realistically, the Bears never should have been in the position for Cody Parkey to win or lose them the game.
Brad?
Yeah, I'm totally with you, Adam. I think the lesson of this entire Bears season really is, if you had to have one takeaway, is just how much coaching matters. So, yes, I agree Nagy did not bring his best effort today. We also, of course, would not have been in this position, without him in the first place. I think the reason why it's so tough, like you mentioned, Robert, is I firmly believe, bias aside, this team was one of those teams that just kind of had that feel about it that they could get hot at the right time and make a run. I think even on that last Eagles drive, two back-to-back plays with awful missed tackles. The one to Goddard, or Goddard, however you say that, Dallas Goedert, the backup tight end for the Eagles, really sticks in my mind. Two guys over the middle. He kind of bounces off both and is able to extend for a first down. That one was an absolute killer. And all that stuff comes back, once the clock becomes a factor and everything like that. Like you said, Parkey really should, he should have made that kick, but he is not the scapegoat in my mind. We probably shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. Tough pill to swallow, but the blame can definitely be shared all around.
This is the Blitz Network Radio. You can follow us on Twitter at the BlitzNet. I think, guys, really just watching this game, the Bears weren't ready for a team, the type of team that the Eagles really were. So they're a team that relied, like kind of like you just touched on, Brad. They rely a lot on tight ends. They rely a lot on 12 personnel and Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, and that victimized the Bears in the second half. And really, for the most part this season, I don't think I can really think off the top of my head of a game where the Bears had their asses kicked up and down the field in the trenches. I mean, the Bears defense, like as a whole, did well enough, but that offensive line for the Eagles held up really well. And the Bears offensive line flat out was just mauled by Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and Chris Sloan and Michael Bennett. They were kicked up and down the field. Both the Bears offensive line and defensive line had no answer for that. And you couple that with the tight ends, and it's just like, that might have been why some people were afraid of Philadelphia as a matchup for the Bears, that they were the one team that could match them in that sense. And it's almost too fitting that it turned out that way.
Yeah, I guess I can kick us off. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. I mean, the game of football is won and lost in the trenches. That's why the Eagles are who they are. And I agree with you. This offensive line had really taken a turn, down the home stretch that, you believe they were going to put up a good protection. They were not at their best today. I tweeted about it during the game, but a guy like Timmy Jernigan, for the Eagles coming back in like week 12 or later is just an unfair guy to add, to that defensive line late in the year. I think he had a quiet impact today, but I think he played well. I mean, yeah, they just dominated in the trenches, and I think Jim Schwartz, give him credit for a good game plan. The spy linebacker on Mitchell the entire game. Yes, he hurt his heel on that run, but I don't think he would have been looking to run regardless. Yeah, I mean, they just showed up, and like you said, they look like the more aggressive team, maybe not the better team, but just the team more hungry.
Adam, what do you think?
I don't know. I think because I thought the Bears, I felt like their front seven did a pretty good job. The Eagles busted a few runs off through there. But otherwise, I think that, they controlled the run game pretty well. They got some pressure. They didn't have a ton of sacks, but they controlled, I thought it was kind of a battle. I don't really think that the Eagles dominated the line of scrimmage or really even won. I felt like it was kind of a draw there where both teams played well. The offensive line for the Bears could have been a lot better. And obviously that was a huge part of, the run game really struggling to take off. But, the Eagles had the 5th best run defense in football coming into the game. So trying to run on their front seven is kind of ill-advised to begin with. So I don't know. I don't know that necessarily. For me, I don't feel like it comes down to that because I guess because this game was so close to me, that just shows how much of a even battle it was for those two teams in the trenches because the margin was the smallest it could be, just 1 point. And so I think both offensive lines and defensive lines actually had pretty good games today on both sides. I don't think either team's play in that regard, won or lost them the game.
Whoa. What do we make of the Bears' offensive play in the first half? A little bit of malaise there. I mean, I kind of agree with you, Adam, where it was even, and you give that credit. It was a back and forth battle, but I mean, the Bears had 4 punts in the first half. They had 2 field goals, a 6-3 lead. That was really the opportunity where they probably could have put the game away, where they let Philadelphia hang around. That it felt like a much more eventful game than 6-3. And then either of you can take this.
Yeah, I think I said it before, but I just thought the play calling was so bizarre. In the first half, Taquan Mizell had as many carries and passing targets as Tariq Cohen did. And, that to me, Taquan Mizell is kind of a well-worn path at this point. We know what he is, and it just seems like Matt Nagy won't give up on him for better or for worse. But at the end of the day, when he is getting as much usage as Tariq Cohen, who is absolutely a game breaker for this team, that is asinine, play calling and personnel decisions to me, and really just kind of again, it's kind of emblematic of just what a strange decision and strange first half that was for Matt Nagy to give more plays to the inferior player in that situation.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we rag on Taquan Mizell a good amount. Even Benny Cunningham had a 3rd and 3 carry. It was like middle of the field. It the Bears totally got bailed out with a, I want to say illegal hands to the face call on the Eagles, but that should have killed that second field goal drive as well. I also agree with you, Robert, and I probably tweeted it from the Blitznet account like 10 times, but there was that feeling that you need 7 here, you need 7 here, and they kept either settling for field goals or just calling, relatively passive play calling and not going for 7, and I mean, it came back to bite them.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just to kind of double back too, I said it earlier, but I was just very surprised at how, even just like beyond the personnel and the actual, the run plays and who was playing, I was just surprised at how little they opened up the passing game in the first half, just because Mitchell Trubisky has picked apart bad defenses this year. We saw what he did to Tampa Bay. We saw what he did to Detroit. And, I went as far in my prediction for this game to predict that he would throw for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. And aside from the 2 touchdowns, I was spot on. And if they had, he threw for 300 more yards, if they had opened up that playbook and attacked that depleted Eagles secondary earlier on in the game, I think that's a way different story. The Bears really could have gone into halftime with a more aggressive approach with, a couple touchdowns on the board, but instead they were just very conservative. And yeah, I just think, obviously I can't say this with any level of certainty, but I just wonder if maybe Nagy was afraid of repeating the mess from Kansas City last year, where he really didn't even have that bad of a second half, but he was so conservative so early on because he didn't want to have to mess it up later. Maybe, I don't know. Like I said, I can't say that with certainty, but that's just kind of what it felt like, where he was afraid to really open things up and make mistakes.
Yeah, just in response, I do think that he may have in previous games kind of gotten away with it, and the Bears were lucky to come out with wins. And, I would never accuse him of being a guy that would kind of rest on his laurels or not still learn from wins. But I agree. The first half play calling, I mean, I can't remember a throw outside the numbers the whole time. Everything was over the middle of the field on, quick slants, dig routes. I mean, nothing. And then finally the double move. I mean, Allen Robinson, it worked like 4 times in the double move on the outside, and he started getting Gabriel in the yeah. I think he definitely was very passive and was like, well, they're not scoring either, so I trust this defense, and it's a 1-possession game pretty much the whole time. But yeah, they definitely could have built up a bit of a lead that would have been easier to maintain, down the stretch. Yeah,
and I think, you mentioned that thing too about having the great defense. Like, playing conservative because you have a great defense is not really the ideal way to win, because I've said it several times in writing and on this podcast, Mitch Trubisky doesn't have to win them games. But I think, he has showed at times this year that he's actually capable of doing it, even if he doesn't have to. And so why not let him do it even if he doesn't have to?
100%. And like you said, I mean, the injuries to the Eagles secondary are deep, and, that's their weakness right now. So they didn't, capitalize on that as much as they could have.
How much, guys, do we think the Bears ended up missing Trey Burton? This was something we touched on in the pre-show. Was how much of their offensive struggles, how much of Nagy's, maybe if his play calling was affected by that as the Swiss Army knife, offensive Swiss Army knife, how much did that late injury of, I think Burton woke up yesterday with the groin injury. That's what the official word was after today's game. How much did that affect their offense?
I think it had a huge effect. Not even just because of Trey Burton, the player, like what the kind of playmaker he is, but a huge part of it is because as good as Adam Shaheen is, or as people, I guess, want him to be, because I haven't really seen it from him, honestly, personally, but as for everything that he is, he's not Trey Burton. He's not, it's called the U tight end. And, that's just not what Adam Shaheen is, and the Bears don't have another one outside of Trey Burton, and that opens up everything for or I shouldn't say everything, but so much for the Bears in the middle of the field by having him out there, and it really changes the way defenses approach them. And I know in our pre-production meeting here, Brad mentioned how much it affects Tariq Cohen. I can't speak to that myself, but it's just, I think it opens up so many more options when you have another threat like that, and when you have a guy who's going to roam the middle of the field and give defenses something else to keep an eye on. And so I do think it had a major impact.
Yeah, I had a lot of thoughts pregame about this. I think that, it's impossible as Bears fans this season to really complain much about injuries. I mean, this is the healthiest team I think I can remember, maybe since I started seriously following the Bears. But I do think Trey Burton's a guy where, the stats may not jump off the stat sheet, on a week-to-week basis, but he does so many little things. And yeah, I should go find this guy on Twitter and give him a shout out, but his impact on other players on the offense, is evident. I also think that just from more of a mentality standpoint, I mean, I do think Allen Robinson is Mitchell's go-to guy, Trubisky's go-to guy, but I think Trey Burton's that calming, kind of steady presence, big third down threat, and just kind of an anchor for Trubisky. And yeah, I think he was missed a lot.
From the other side of the coin, guys, Eddie Jackson active, but does not start, does not end up featuring, I believe, on any snaps. The defense, I mean, respectively held up well, only allowing 16 points, but you have to think maybe you have Jackson in there and an errant Foles pass gets picked off. I mean, he had 2 interceptions otherwise, or maybe Jackson swings some of those Eagles' big pass plays that it felt like Foles hung them forever on rainbows, and somehow an Eagles receiver was on the other end of it. This might be an obvious answer. This might be an obvious elaboration, but how much did they miss Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever you're missing a first-team All-Pro safety, you can't say it wasn't an impact. And like you said, the defense did hold up well, but I totally agree that some of those just, moonshot lobs from Foles, I mean, he may not have even considered doing them, much less them working out, if Eddie Jackson was roaming the field. I will say that I did like how Deion Bush played, which could be important going forward. I thought he had a good game. My concern with him at times has been tackling, and he had what I thought was one of the best form tackles of the night tonight on Darren Sproles. I remember that in the first half. But yeah, Eddie's loss was definitely huge. But like you said, they still had 2 interceptions. They still held the Eagles, pretty well. But I do think, again, he's one of those guys like Trey where everyone just feels more comfortable and more confident when he's out there with them. He's one of those guys that just teammates fizz just like, they feel better knowing he's there. So.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with all that. And, Rob and Brad, you both mentioned it, just those like moonshot passes that Foles was lobbing up in the second half that were working. And it was honestly such an infuriating thing because it was like never in a million years should that ever work. He was just tossing them up with like a prayer and they were working out perfectly for him. And, with Eddie Jackson in the game, I mean, like you said, Brad, he might not even attempt those. And if he does, I think at least 2 of those balls are getting picked off. So like with Eddie Jackson in the game, I would almost want Nick Foles to be throwing those balls up like that. And not having him in there was a major loss. Obviously, Brad said Deion Bush played well. And I think, I agree with that. But I think the confusing thing for me is that if Eddie Jackson wasn't good enough to go, why was he even active? Not that, any of the inactive players really might have had a larger impact on the game, but it just to me is kind of a bizarre thing for him to be on the active roster for the game and not even feature in a single snap, even in the crunch time moments when the Bears really probably could have used him. Just kind of a strange decision there. But overall, Eddie Jackson, like Brad said, first team All-Pro safety. You can't understate the impact that losing a player like that has on a defense.
I'm trying to think of how often the Bears themselves actually pressured Foles, and I think Mac might have had a few. I know Floyd had his 1 sack. The strength of the team, really, from that perspective, seemed negated to me. The goal line stand, I almost goal line stand. That is. I almost don't know what to make of it because it seemed like the most of those final Eagles possessions, especially in the second half, were just pulling a rabbit out of the hat. One of them was aided by penalties, and the other where it was just where Foles was rarely under siege. A little bit jarring, to be honest.
I mean, I think I said earlier, I thought the Bears did a decent job of getting pressure. They didn't have a lot of sacks, but I mean, I think they hit Foles, almost 5 or 6 or 7 times. They were getting to the quarterback quite often. They were hurrying his throws, making it difficult for him to get the throws out there that he wanted to make. So I guess I didn't experience the same thing, but at the end of the day, I mean, when the Eagles, I didn't think that the Eagles had a prayer of scoring 2 touchdowns on this Bears defense. And, that last drive, obviously maybe a little bit of an attrition thing with just how much, how long the game had gone on and how many stops the Bears had on the defensive side. But I guess I just didn't have a lot of any issue with the amount of pressure they got on Foles in this game.
Yeah, I guess I should again preface, I don't think it's fair for Bears fans this season to complain about injuries, but, 2 guys we didn't mention, particularly what you said, Rob, about the goal line almost stand. I mean, I think Sherman McManus has been a great fill-in for Bryce Callahan, but I have to wonder, does Bryce Callahan make that play on Golden Tate? I mean, it's a question. And then another guy, in Aaron Lynch, who is not a starter, but all year long has been a great rotational piece on, for the pass rush. I agree. They weren't bad, but I think Robert and I, as opposed to you, Adam, just we're almost expecting one of those otherworldly performances, one of those Rams performances where it seemed like every single snap, Jared Goff, couldn't even get a pass off, and they weren't that today.
I was told Nick Foles was a god, at least by a lot of the narrative, and exactly, Brad. I was thinking that the Bears would completely destroy that sentiment that mostly came from Philadelphia and the national perspective. And I mean, yeah, he wasn't like awesome or anything. He wasn't Tom Brady, but they didn't really do it. I thought that kind of performance was coming. On that injury note, the Bears only lost 15 starts all year, and it's so, I guess, again, poetic that the three of those biggest starts, Lynch, Callahan, Jackson, and even Burton. Wait, no, 16 actually. I'm miscounting. 16 missed starts all year. That's very, very low. Last year they had 63 throughout 16 games. Yeah, it's unfortunate that it comes at the end. So it's almost like it gets your hopes up and then has everything come crashing down in a sense when you lose those key pieces right there to help end your season.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that says it all. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that.
Yeah.
A bunch of revenge games, guys. Alshon Jeffrey, 6 receptions, 82 yards. Cravon LeBlanc getting burned by Anthony Miller.
He balled out today. Cravon LeBlanc did.
He did.
He had a really good game.
Agreed.
Let's talk about actually that little bit of that bomb that Trubisky had to Miller on, I believe, a second or third. It was a second down play. Where the ball was caught, but there was no clear recovery by either team, so it ended up just being a Bears redo. And I don't think the Bears got any. I'm not sure. Just the Bears didn't get any points out of that possession. And it's gonna be for either of you two. What did we think about that whole sequence? Obviously, when looking back on it in a 1-point loss in hindsight, might have been something that came back to cost the Bears. But I'm not going to really criticize the officials too much because that's not exactly a situation that comes up very often, if at all, in any given season, let alone a game.
Sure. Well, I could be wrong, but I do think they came away with a field goal there. But I could be wrong on that. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, a bizarre circumstance to happen. I'm not really a big blame the refs guy. It tends to even out both ways. Apparently, according to my Twitter feed, apparently, it was handled the right way. I think part of the confusion is the ref making the call didn't even sound like he had, less confidence than anyone. And then the guy in the booth, Terry McCauley, also talking as though it seemed like they were making up the rule on the fly. I mean, it still would have been, first and goal from like the 8 or 9 yard line, maybe even further. It doesn't guarantee they score a touchdown there. Just a bizarre play all around. But I kind of do believe it in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't really that big of an impact.
Yeah, I think kind of along the same lines, like Brad said, they did end up, by the rule book, apparently calling it correctly. I think there was a lot, obviously, like Brad said, a lot of confusion because of the TV announcers not really knowing what was going on. So I guess my only takeaway is that I wish, what's funny is everyone on the field obviously thought it was an incomplete pass. And watching it live, I thought it was an incomplete pass just because LeBlanc kept his hand in there the whole time, all the way to the ground. The ball comes out. So I guess I just wish that Anthony Miller, in hindsight, would have been like, oh, shit, and gone and picked that football up and ran into the end zone. And then, at the end of that play after the review, you have a touchdown. So, yeah, that's just the really weird thing. It's just it's a tough situation. I wish the rule was different, where the Bears would have gotten the ball exactly where they fumbled it, like Terry McCauley had originally suggested. But yeah, I mean, again, at the end of the day, like Brad said, they did get a field goal after that because it was 3 at the time. They went in halftime 6-3, so it was tough. But I don't think it ends up being exciting or anything like that.
Was Jordan Howard used enough? Was the running game in general used enough? As a staff, we are very much, I know we are very much running backs matter, little matter, running backs don't matter, or some of us are.
Except for Brandon.
except for Brandon, really, but we don't talk about him. Was the running game used enough, guys? 43-18 pass run ratio. 43-18. Sorry, ESPN's box score keeps popping up. Anyway, go on.
So, okay, the pass run ratio. I thought the run game was fine. I actually thought the Bears should have run the ball less, because, like I said earlier, the Eagles had the number 5 rush defense coming into this game, and Fletcher Cox. Brad mentioned Timmy Jernigan. Their linebacker Bradham had a really good game, and he's not an elite talent, but very strong, dependable player in that as a linebacker there. So there's so much there was so much talent on that front 7, and the run game was just not working at all, that it was just difficult for me to really get behind how much they were running the football. Obviously you want to have a little bit of balance, but I just thought, like I said earlier, I thought that they should have opened up the passing a little more, and then with how good Trubisky was in the second half, I thought they just should have never stopped they never should have taken the ball out of his hands, because he was just dropping dimes left and right. So it was tough. I don't know, because I don't trust Tariq Cohen running the football, really, because I think he doesn't get vertical enough. He runs too horizontal, doesn't get upfield. But then, Jordan Howard doesn't have the speed and the burst to get through that defensive front and really get to that second level easily. And so it was a tough situation.
Yeah, I'd probably mimic a lot of what Adam said, although I do kind of disagree. I actually was expecting a lot more outside running. Like we said many times, Fletcher Cox, one of the best defensive tackles in the league. Up the middle, they're pretty strong. Even as all the way to safety, Malcolm Jenkins is good. Whereas, their linebackers and their corners, to the outside are not as strong. I thought there was going to be a lot of outside running game. They did run the jet sweep to Taylor Gabriel 4 or 5 times. It never worked. I guess my issue is more with, A, how they ran it, where they ran it, and then B, all year long, Nagy was one of the better coaches about throwing the ball on first down. And then maybe, if you get to 2nd and 6, then, go for a run. And I feel like we ran the ball on first down. Even when he started throwing the ball, we still ran the ball on first down a ton with no success or little to no success. And then we were behind the sticks on so many possessions, which is just not what this Bears team is built to do.
I thought after the Roquan pick, I fully expected a sudden change. That was the ideal time to take a shot. And then I believe just off the play-by-play, it was like some kind of little dump off or a screen. No, it was actually a handoff to Howard, and I thought that was a lost opportunity. I mean, I know that's what the benefit of hindsight, but it was just really strange to me, exactly what you said, Brandon, where he wasn't calling the game as he used to, which brings me to the next question, guys. Did the lack of playoff experience actually end up costing the Bears?
No, I don't think so.
Brad?
Yeah, I agree. I do not think that experience was the issue here.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I thought play calling was the issue. I thought, I guess if you want to, like I said earlier, maybe if you want to talk about playoff experience, maybe I guess it's a little speculating and a little, harebrained of a theory, but maybe the only playoff experience that came to matter here was Matt Nagy not wanting to repeat a mistake like he made last year. But I think Adam Hogue from WGN did a pretty good job of breaking down how he actually didn't make that many mistakes. If you read his stuff on WGN.com, in that Chiefs game last year, Nagy didn't really call that bad of a game. So unless that was what Nagy was concerned about, I don't think lack of experience really hurt the Bears here. Mitch Trubisky had never played a game bigger than the Sun Bowl in his life, and he was the best player the Bears had today. And they only lost by 1 point on a missed field goal that, now that I'm on Twitter as we're doing this, and apparently it was tipped at the line of scrimmage by one of the Eagles players. So that's a really, it's just at the end of the day, the Bears could have won this game. And, you could even say that they basically did win the game, save for the missed field goal, because they were in the spot to do it. So I don't think that playoff experience ends up being the deciding factor in this at all.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, I know one thing that I said, and I guess you could try to tie this to experience, but I don't think it has to do with experience. But the one thing that I think is huge in the playoffs that people underrate is just discipline. And I think that, think about it. The biggest drive of the game starts off with the late hit from Adrian Amos on Zach Ertz when he was, I think he already dropped the ball at that point. completely unnecessary, and that turns the entire tide of the game. So to me, that's not experience. It's just keeping your head on your shoulders. I don't think they didn't seem nervous to me. Maybe Mitch a couple throws early, but I didn't see nerves. I didn't see, guys panicking. I think the team was prepared well, but I do think there were some slip ups with discipline. That one drive specifically, I want to say there were 3, maybe 4 penalties against them. And I mean, that drive was basically the story of the game.
I was actually going to lead with what was the turning point into the game, and I think you took it perfectly. I think that Amos penalty on Ertz was what ultimately flipped it. The Bears were in a position to get off the field. I think you give the Eagles that 15 yards for first down. There was a generous spot for Deion Bush and Darren Sproles, a tackle where they had about a 3rd and 11 carry. There was Amos getting victimized by Goddard on that score. Brad, you kind of just alluded to it. So, Adam, what was your turning point?
I don't really think there was I guess it's kind of a weird question. I don't really think there was an exact turning point because obviously it's a 1-point game. So no team really ever had full control. But I think, what we mentioned earlier, just coming off of that, the pick by Roquan Smith and like you said, Rob, the opportunity to make a sudden change and the Bears not doing it and kind of missing out on that chance and ending up with a field goal. I think if the Bears had scored a touchdown on that drive, that would have been, them absolutely taking over the game. And instead they kind of left the Eagles in it a little bit. They left them a window and an opening, and that kind of, let them hang around for a minute. And then obviously, they ended up doing more than hanging around and came back and won the game.
Yeah, I do want to add too, real quick. I noticed the broadcast. You're saying Amos got victimized on that touchdown to Goddard. We also had 10 guys in the field, so that doesn't really help.
Yeah,
very uncharacteristic game on the whole. Ultimately, guys, it's very because I see people already in my mentions. I see people already ready. I think you obviously have to blame Ryan Pace for the kicker, but he still built a 12-4 team. He still built arguably one of the best rosters in the NFL, maybe the best. What losing in the wild card game, losing in the first round, losing to a team at home where you're 7-1 before Sunday night. Again, probably an obvious answer. Was the 2018 season a success?
I guess I'll take it. In my opinion, yes. This might be an unpopular opinion. I'm not a huge believer in moral victories. That's going to be one of the tougher pills to swallow. And I do think the window is, in the NFL is extremely short. I mean, you see teams like the Jaguars, and success doesn't last. But in my opinion, the biggest question mark there could be for a Bears fan is with a good team around him. Not is Mitch Trubisky the best quarterback in the NFL? Is he good enough with a good team around him that he could win a Super Bowl? And I think that the answer to that question, in my opinion, was yes tonight. This was not his best game by any stretch of the imagination, but he started off slow and kept his composure. He finished better than he played in any other part of the game. I think I saw he was 10 of 13 for 175 and a touchdown over his last 3 drives, when he was on offense. So that question, in my opinion, is answered. This team is coming back in a big way next year. But yeah, then you get we're going to play the number 1 seed schedule. We have to play the top NFC teams next year. Stuff like that happens. So, it's a tough question to answer. But I don't say it's a failure. You don't win the Super Bowl. It's tough how they lost. I think they were talented enough to go all the way. But I'm choosing to remain optimistic. And I think that hopefully, what I've been thinking is this was also a version of that first week loss to the Packers, where it's like that loss right in their grasp and they kind of slipped away. I think, helped them rattle off 12 wins. I now think this loss could lead to a pissed off team next year. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned a couple, I think last week on the podcast that it kind of felt like if the Bears didn't end up winning the Super Bowl, that would be a disappointment. And I do still feel that way. But I think, Brad echoed a lot of the sentiments I have where not winning the Super Bowl doesn't make this season as a whole a success. That's just it's a disappointing end result. But the Bears had a good team. this season, and they have a good team moving forward. Most of the key players for this team are locked up. Obviously, there's some loose ends that they will look to tie up, like Bryce Callahan, maybe Bobby Massey. They're going to have to figure some stuff out. There's some holes, but I think especially if you think about it, like if they had, a running back who was a better fit for this offense, they're a more complete team. If they get, maybe an upgrade on their offensive line, they're a more complete team. So those things aren't necessarily going to be easy to come by, but I think this is just the beginning. I think that, the Bears, outshot almost anyone's expectations for them this season. Even I had the most optimistic prediction for them among, our Blitz Network staff at the beginning of the season at 11-5, and they even outshot what I thought they could do. And so with that, in mind, I think this was a success. And, Brad mentioned, can they sustain success? Well, when you look at what has led to teams sustaining success in the NFL, it's been having a good quarterback and having a good head coach. And I think that the Bears showed this year that they have both of those. And with a good defense that's, cost controlled for a long time, I think that they're in a good spot to be good again next year and, even beyond next year.
I'm not someone that picked them to go to the Super Bowl, so I don't see that as a failure. I actually picked the Saints. You guys can feel free to be mad, but I don't think the 2018 season was a failure from that respect. I think separating it, not getting one playoff win. I expected one playoff win. I think that's to me, and maybe that's a little more blunt. Maybe that's like hot take, but I think not getting one playoff win. That's a failure. This roster was good enough to at least play in the divisional round. This roster, on the whole, is definitely one of the 5 or 6 most well balanced in the league. And not getting one playoff win is a failure. That doesn't negate the entire season. That doesn't negate what their future holds. Which I guess really, when we look back on everything, 2019 was always going to be the year. That's something that even last spring we were talking about. Oh, hey, 2018, you get a little bit of that first playoff experience. And then 2019, 2020, you build for the win of 20. You go in to this offseason now where it's Super Bowl or bust. Expectations are high. You fix your kicker, like Adam, like you said, if you fix some of those offensive line issues, you maybe find a more complete running back. And you go, and the 2019 season, it is absolutely Super Bowl or bust now. What's going to happen?
I think I agree with that too. I guess I can't say Super Bowl or bust, but it's a little early for that because I think we'll have to see what happens in the offseason. But I think that for now, you could definitely set the expectations on 2019 for the Super Bowl. You're going to have, like I said, you're going to have the NFL's, arguably best defense that's going to be returning almost completely. You're going to have, a quarterback in Mitch Trubisky who showed you what he can do this year. And, hopefully will take a next step next year. Matt Nagy will hopefully have learned some of the lessons from this. I mean, hopefully everyone will have learned something from this. And like Brad said, come back hungrier. So I do think that, at the moment, setting the sights on the Super Bowl for next year is not unrealistic at all.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that next year, Super Bowl or bust always sounds a bit dramatic, but I think it's fair to say that this team next year, it's the best opportunity, the best window they'll have to win the Super Bowl, in a long time and maybe for a long time. I'll obviously be writing all about all these things, but there isn't a ton of turnover. Like you guys both mentioned, there are a couple key pieces. The right side of the offensive line, I think, in my opinion, that has now become number one priority. What they do with Callahan and Amos, obviously. And running back, as much as you said at the beginning of the show, we like to joke isn't extremely important, and I don't think it is. But I think that, as you both said, Cohen and Howard, if we had that every down back, a guy that really worked with Nagy offense, it would have elevated that little bit more that I think it really could have pushed them over the edge.
Ultimately, I think the Bears defense, and just my final conclusion, my final bow on all of this, I don't think the Bears defense is going to be as good next year, just by natural variance of turnovers and injuries. The two biggest, this was something I tweeted about, I think, in the lead up to the game. They're not going to have the same kind of luck on those things. The 36 turnovers, that's going to come down a little bit, and they're going to have a little bit worse luck with injuries. But what's going to keep them afloat, and what should have everyone listening to this podcast as optimistic as it gets. I know even in the aftermath of a difficult defeat, Trubisky, like you alluded to, Adam, it's Trubisky taking that next step and becoming the real focal point of the team. If the Bears are going to be contenders in 2019, this offense has to be high flying. They really can't be just an average offense as they were for most of the year, and where it's Trubisky making clutch plays on third downs, making really putting everyone on his back. They have to be a high flying top 5, top 10 attack, balance, obviously built well up front. They can't have those same highs and lows, really mostly lows. That's what's going to stand out. That's what's going to prevent you from taking this. That's what's going to prevent you from taking a step back like the Jaguars and the Vikings did, because you have the young quarterback, you have the coach, and now they have to take the reins as the real focal point of this team. The defense is still going to be good. The defense is still going to be one of the best in football. But if the Bears for the Bears not to take a step back, for the Bears to still be a contender, it really has to become Trubisky's team and this offense's team beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, and I think, I agree with that, but I think, also to an extent, you look at the way that the season developed, and I think that in a lot of ways, this kind of already is Mitch Trubisky's team, and he just needs to kind of, sort out some of the inconsistencies. And I think, an off season of growth, and now that he knows the game plan and knows the offense, I think that we'll see that step forward next year for him.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, look at the offense. I mean, Robinson's new, Gabriel's new, Miller's new, Burton's new, Shaheen, missed time. I mean, Trubisky getting a full offseason to develop an even better chemistry with these guys that, I think it's pretty obvious that, they would die for him and he would do the same for them. So in terms of mentality and the locker room, I think that's all, where it needs to be. But yeah, I completely agree that, I mean, first of all, yeah, statistically, this defense, I mean, cannot be as good as it was this year, next year. Like you said, the variance with turnovers, injuries as well. They're obviously going to lose some guys. A depth piece like Lynch probably can't stick around. I don't want to go into specifics, but stuff like that. I agree. The offense needs to be also in the top 10, to match that defense. They need to win some games maybe where the defense doesn't really show up, which, I'm not sure if that happened this year. So
I don't think it did.
Possible.
I don't think it did. I don't think there was really a game where the defense didn't show up and the Bears ended up winning. And it was actually maybe that Dolphins game way back in October. The offense actually did pick it up, but Cody Parkey ironically ended up missing that kick in overtime and a little bit of other circumstances, a little bit of poetic justice coming back. Yeah, you'll have to have Trubisky and company be able to do that next year. I think they've shown at times that they're capable of doing so. Guys, just to wrap all of this up, otherwise, I appreciate you coming on with me this season. I know we are, I guess, starting off-season coverage, at least typically just from the Bears' perspective. We do cover other things. We're starting a little earlier than anticipated, but it's been fun working with you guys. It's been fun building this, and it's been fun building this for everybody listening as well. Looking forward to where it goes, however long it does last.
Yeah, I think, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what the Bears do this offseason and, how we're going to have a good time covering it and what it means for next year and, how they go from a team that, I said before, I think it's a little early to maybe say Super Bowl or bust, but can they add enough? Can they have, maybe not quite the offseason that the Rams had this past offseason, but can they go ahead and be aggressive and add some players to where they go into next year as a team that looks like the Super Bowl favorites and we really feel like it's Super Bowl or bust for them?
Yeah, Robert, it's been an awesome season. I can't thank you enough for bringing me on. I've had a blast. I think it's been my favorite Bears season in a while, not just because we're, relevant, but also just because of all the fun we've had with each other. And, the off-season coverage is kind of my thing. So, for me, it's almost like I, reverse commute. I'm getting ready to start working hard this offseason. But, yeah, I think they're primed to, fill some holes, and the sky's the limit for this team in 2019.
The next step, guys, I think, just in terms of the standings, is getting that first-round bye. You get that first-round bye. If you want to keep following along the Rams model the way that people have done so, you get that first-round bye, you win the North again, and then that's what really has to happen. And that'll happen through really everything they do in the offseason, ideally, all the moves that we will have covered for you here at the Blitz Network. Still here in the aftermath of the Bears' 16-15 loss to the Eagles in the NFC wildcard game. A run that ended, like I just said a little bit earlier, ended a little bit sooner than anybody with the Bears, anybody that covered the Bears, anybody that rooted for the Bears anticipated, but it ended nonetheless. It's been fun covering this season for all of you. It's been fun building this with all of you. Appreciate your support. Hope you'll stick along with us as we unfold until April. We are, yes, in draft mode and in free agency mode, and we will have it covered. The Bears will be back. I can assure you on that note. For Adam, for Brad, you can follow Adam on Twitter at _Adam Hess. You can follow Brad on Twitter at BradOTC. For these two fine gentlemen, myself, who you can follow on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. Stay classy, everybody.